romance, love, social convention, gender roles, and religion. Charlotte Bronte's most famous novel challenges ideas on all these topics, and we are here to discuss it. I'm Charlene.
And I'm Mike.
And this is Jane Eyre Files. Episode 21, an interview with Michael Jayston. Hello, husband.
Hello, Michael Jayston's biggest fan.
It's true.
Yeah.
He actually wrote that down in an autograph, so it's true.
Did he? Yeah, I defy anybody else to challenge you for that title. Well, this is pretty special. This is our first guest ever on the Jane Eyre Files podcast. We're thrilled to interview the wonderful Michael Jayston.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we can go on for a long time about our relationship with him. It's been a wonderful time knowing him and, like I said, having met him through you. But let's go back. You discovered Jane Eyre when you were in high school?
Yes, I first read it in the sophomore year of high school. Okay,
so from reading Jane Eyre in high school to interviewing Michael Jayston in 2022. How did we get here? How does Michael Jayston come into your life?
Okay, well, this is kind of one of my favorite stories to tell, but I read Jane Eyre, and then I went and looked up all the adaptations I could find in the library, and then the 1983 miniseries with Zelia Clark and Timothy Dalton. Now, that was the first miniseries, long-form adaptation I saw, and that one, it was the best because it was the most complete, and I do love an adaptation that is true to the book. And so that was my favorite for a long time. And then when I went to college, I discovered the Internet Movie Database, and it was in its fledgling stages at that time, I think, because there wasn't really a lot of information on there. And I saw the entry for a Jane Eyre adaptation in 1973, so that was shocking to me that there was 10 years before there was another miniseries. Mm-hmm. And of course I hadn't heard of it at that time.
Both by the BBC, I assume, I think, right?
Yeah. And it starred Sorcha, Cusack, and Michael Jayston, both actors I've not heard of at that time. And
both actors I'd never heard of before I met you. I don't think, yeah.
Yeah, and then so the Internet Movie Database had these message boards, and someone on the board said they had copies of this version that they had made from a VHS recording. I think when the series was aired in the U.S. in 1978 or something like that. They also cut off the first episode, so they cut out Jane's childhood when they aired it in the U.S.
Really?
Yeah. So she had the 4 episodes. She had put it on DVD, and she was offering it for anyone who'd like a copy because you couldn't get anywhere else. So she did send me that copy, and I remember being so excited. I would check the mail every day in my dorms at college, and finally came, and I watched it all in one day.
One day,
and
approximately how many adaptations had you seen by this point?
Oh, that's a difficult question to say.
I mean, approximately,
I feel like I'd seen maybe the Orson Welles, obviously William Hurt, I'm just saying it by the Rochesters, Syrian Hines, and maybe George C. Scott.
And you hadn't seen the Timothy Dalton?
Oh, and Timothy Dalton, of course.
Yeah.
So the
5
most,
or 6.
Yeah, the ones that are very easy to find.
Okay.
And so I watched the 1973 adaptation all in one day, and I just absolutely fell in love with it.
Because Michael Jayston.
I mean, Michael Jayston was a huge part of it. Obviously, it's a great script. I really loved the way that they adapted it. Sorcha was a great Jane, but Michael Jayston was my absolute favorite, and he is my definitive Rochester, where his performance was just so powerful and nuanced to me. And I remember at the end of the scene where Mr. Rochester and Jane had just saved Mr. Rochester from the fire, and they're talking, and Jane trying to get away. So Mr. Rochester eventually lets her leave, and when she has just left, closed the door, Mr. Rochester just says Jane, just so softly. Michael Jayston just does it so perfectly that I feel like that was the moment where I was like, this is my favorite, and he's amazing.
I have pleasure in owing you so immense a debt.
Good night, sir. There is no debt.
I knew. I saw it in your eyes when I first beheld you.
What, sir?
That you would revive some goodness in me. Your eyes. That expression did not strike delight to my inmost heart for nothing. And people talk of natural sympathies. I've heard of good genii, and there are grains of truth in the wildest fable. My cherished preserver, good night. You're cold. Go then.
I will, sir, when you release my hand.
Your hand.
Good night, sir.
Yes. Good night. Jane.
I feel like, we've talked about it on the show at some point or another, but I'm a big James Bond fan. So when you showed me all the adaptations, you said Michael Jayston's the best, he's the best, he's the best. Because you showed them all to me in order, chronological order.
Yeah.
And I was waiting for Timothy Dalton, and I wound up liking him my favorite. He was my favorite. But then I think I've mentioned, as I've reread the book, I start to see it as Michael Jayston now. Because I think your influence has rubbed off on me. And I
don't know about that.
Well, I start to see the things that you noticed about Timothy Dalton's performance and the things that we noticed about Michael Jayston's performance. And in our last episode, we talked about the gypsy scene. And I feel like the gypsy scene was a really good example. Timothy Dalton is good. Michael Jayston is also really good. I'm starting to see why you like his performance so much. And I'm looking forward to watching the 73 version when we're done with this book.
That will be fun.
But then so you like Michael Jayston. Then what do? You watch all these, you watch the adaptation, he's your favorite. You didn't just leave it there. What'd you do next?
Well, at that time, again, not a lot of information about this series. And I remember, that time waiting for the DVD to come, I was searching. I was trying to find any more information. I was so curious. Like, okay, what did this adaptation look like? Who are these actors? And I found a Radio Times cover, and that was about it. There was no pictures. So when I got the DVD, I was like, I'm going to put up more information. I'm going to screen cap this whole thing, make a lot of pictures available to people so they could see what this adaptation looks like, even though it's hard to get a hold of a copy of it. And I wanted a whole full cast list, which was not on Internet Movie Database at the time. So I made a website, and I never made a website at that time. So I learned how to do it, and I put it up there. And from there, I decided I'm going to make a website for Michael Jayston's career. And that took a little bit longer because I started watching a lot of his things. I picked up Nicholas and Alexandra at my local DVD store and tried to find things online, and just Doctor Who. I watched Doctor Who afterwards. So I became a fan of his because his acting was just so amazing and incredible. If you watch Nicholas and Alexandra right after watching Rochester, I feel like they're such polar opposite characters that it's wonderful to see how immersive he is in these roles. And so I just became a huge fan of his as an actor.
What I also find interesting is how Michael Jayston appeared as he was Doctor Who's adversary in a whole season of that show in the mid-1980s. And because of Jane Eyre, you become a Doctor Who fan as a result. And
most times it's the other way around.
Yeah, a lot of times, because we go to Doctor Who conventions and we have to tell people, oh yeah, you think he's good in Doctor Who, he's also really good in this Jane Eyre adaptation.
Yeah, definitely.
But so then was the website getting any traction? Did it come to anybody's attention, I should say?
Well, yes. So it was a few years later that I got an email from a woman who said she knows Michael Jayston and she was going to show the website to him. And obviously I was very excited, and I thanked her, sent her email back. And then maybe a couple of weeks later, I got an email from Michael Jayston.
Michael Jayston himself.
Yes. And he said, thank you for creating the website. And he was very kind, and he loved the website. So I was so happy. And I didn't really, I obviously responded, but we didn't really have a correspondence or anything. Part of me was wondering, I wonder if that was really Michael Jayston. It would be a weird trick for someone to play. But then maybe a year or two later, I'm taking a trip to Poland to visit a friend. And it was a very long trip. I don't recommend doing a flight with 2 layovers. So I was flying from LA and to London, and then London to Germany, and then Germany to Poland.
Okay.
And from that London to Germany leg, we had landed, and I had put my baggage across the way in the luggage compartment because there's no room on my side. And when we had landed, I went to get my luggage. I kind of turned turned back and I saw Michael Jayston
On the flight.
on my flight. And I mean, what an incredible coincidence. And he was just standing there, waiting. We were all waiting to get off the plane. And I was just kind of freaking out.
Oh, I bet.
But eventually pulled it together and I was like, okay, I have to say something because he's my favorite actor and I'm not going to have this opportunity. So I said, oh, Michael Jayston, I'm such a big fan of yours. And he seemed surprised and he was kind of laughing and he kind of said, we could talk when we get off the plane. And the plane didn't disembark us in the terminal. We had to get into a shuttle on the tarmac, and then that will take us to the terminal. So I even had a little bit extra time to talk to him. And on the shuttle ride over, I mentioned my website because I was curious to know if he knew about it since I got that email. And I just said, I have a website for you. And he said, oh, there's an American lady named Charlene who has a website. And I thought, oh my God, that's me.
So apparently that was him that emailed you then.
Yes. So we talked a little bit. I had to catch a flight. He was there to film. He actually filmed a TV movie called Albert's Memorial there. It's actually really, really interesting. It has like kind of a Weekend at Bernie's vibe because Mr. Michael Jayston is actually dead and they have to transport him and they have to dress him up and pretend like he's alive.
Wow.
Yeah.
I gotta find this. Okay.
Anyway, so we chatted and he was very kind and he's, if anyone ever gets a chance to talk to him, he's always ready to talk to you. He's very personable and open and friendly. And he mentioned, next time you're ever in England, let me take you out to lunch because, I guess he's very appreciative of the website, which I was absolutely flabbergasted by. It was very kind of him. And so whenever there's an opportunity to see him, like if I go to if I have another trip to England or like this time when he came to LA for the Doctor Who convention, I always reach out to him and he's always happy to see me and we have lunch or we get together for a little bit and talk, and it's just been amazing to think of him as a friend. Yeah,
and I'm glad that I got to meet him as well through you. It was the Doctor Who convention we went to in 2019. Yeah, and it was great. I could tell the moment we saw him, he was so delighted to see you, and it was nice for you to be, hey, this is my husband. Oh, and I hit it off with him really well. He treated us to a couple of dinners, and we got to see him. And then a couple of months later, we went back to England for our honeymoon, and he took us out to lunch. We met his wife, as well, and so she's so wonderful too. Yeah, we've sent him Christmas cards. We've been in touch. He did he was in some sort of a comic convention Zoom panel during the pandemic, and you and I woke up at 5 a.m. so that we could take part in it and ask him some questions as well. And so, and so thankfully he made an appearance at this year's Doctor Who convention. It's called Gallifrey 1. It's every year over President's Day weekend at a hotel, at the Marriott Hotel next to the LAX airport. And as soon as we saw that he was coming, we're like, we're doing this Jane Eyre Files podcast. Yes, I had to ask him if he would mind being interviewed about Jane Eyre, and thankfully he said absolutely, and we have this interview now. Yeah, without further ado, let's just get right to it. This is our interview with Michael Jayston. Pleased to be joined by the best Edward Fairfax Rochester in the best adaptation of Jane Eyre. Michael Jayston, how are you, sir? I'm fine, thank you. And flattery will get you everywhere. Well, let's just jump right in. The first question I wanted to ask you is, apparently, have you read Jane Eyre, and do you remember your first impressions of the novel when you read it? Oh, yeah. I don't know whether I'd read it before I saw Orson Welles play it. Yes, I must have read it. Because my mother used to read stories to me before I was too young to realise, like, Julius Caesar and things like that, and poetry. And then I realised, I had comics as well, but and I liked it a lot. I didn't quite understand the kind of ambience of, the gentleman and the thing with his mad woman in the attic and all that lot, but I liked it. And then I saw Orson Welles and I thought Orson Welles was very good. I didn't think I'd ever play it. Really? Yeah, because I read in an interview that you had played it in drama school. Oh, yeah. And that was surprising to me. Well, I had a marvellous chap who I took grade 8 because I was determined to get into drama school at that time.
And I'd saved up, and I'd left the cold board, well, to make some money in the fish market. And I was getting up at 4:00 in the morning. They were paying me a lot of money, but I'd saved enough. But then I went to see Roland Hill, and I got one of the top grade 8s ever with the performing thing. So I found out later. And Roland Hill said, he said, audition for the scholarship. I have to see. And it was a guy called Warren Beatty, who was a Canadian actor. And you wouldn't know him now, but very, very good actor in the 40s, 50s, 60s. Played a lot of Air Force pilots and things like that. And he gave me the scholarship. All right, I'll tell you, I did the last speech from Dr. Faustus, the Marlowe's Faustus, and some comedy. I've forgotten what the comedy was, but the last speech, I must have been so big-headed because I remember meeting Ken Loach on the tube train, and he was going to Northampton Rep. I hadn't seen him for about a year because we were in the same amateur company in Nottingham. He was going to Northampton Rep because he'd started off as a solicitor or something, and he packed that up. I said, well, good luck. And he said, well, good luck to you. What are you doing? I said, I'm doing the last speech of Faustus. He said, oh, God, that's tricky. And I got a bit worried, but I did it. And it was, well, I found out that somebody else who was already in Guildhall said it was a hammy performance, over the top. But BT gave me and I met him about 25 years later and just said thanks. Because I've had a great career, and he didn't remember, obviously. But I said, you gave me the scholarship.
And then who played Jane opposite you when you were in that school?
A lady called Jean Rogers, who looked a bit like Vivian Lee. She was totally wrong for it, casting, but she was very good. And I was going out with her at the time. But because there were so many, ladies involved, they always split I did 4 performances with Jean and about 4 performances with a lovely actress called Philippa Rowe, who was more, Philippa, she wasn't plain, but you know what I mean? She wasn't a glamorous like Jean Rogers. I mean, Jean did the best, like putting the makeup on and making herself look a bit more dowdy, but you don't get away with it. It's like when George C. Scott played it with Susanna York was far too beautiful.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah. But then how did your approach when you played Rochester in that performance differ from the performance when you did
this guy who gave me the scholarship, he was then my main tutor. I had a lot of very fine tutors, but he was my main tutor. And he went on and on about the value of words. And I used to do loads of bits of Shakespeare's speeches to get the words right, because I had a slight Nottingham accent. I still have when I have a few drinks, but I had a slight Nottingham accent at the time. Not heavy. And of course, I found out when I leave drama school, everybody was getting northern parts, like Albert Finney and all, doing hey, how are you? And I thought, why did I waste my time because I can still go back to that. But I thought, I spent all that time at drama school and all the big parts are going to Peter O'Toole, who's doing leads, or, Albert Finney and people like that. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, you asked me what did you say about
your approach to playing it in primary school versus
it was the value of words, and he directed it. Roland Hill directed it. Okay. And I thought he was marvellous, and it got marvellous notices as well, actually. But I was far too young. I was 24. I think, when I played that.
Yeah, because I think Rochester is very wordy. So there's a lot to dialogue to go through, and you do it really well in 1973, my humble opinion. I think you just...
Well, I find now, my wife keeps saying that I know I had a fantastic memory. I didn't know at the time, because I thought I learnt the lines just like that, and I thought everybody else did until I found out. Like, Harry Andrews? He was in The Hill. Okay. Olivier but he had terrible problems with lines. But Olivier gave him the leeway. I mean, you have to learn the lines, to me. The method people prefer it the other way around. Yeah. They get and then learn the lines at the last minute, but that's not good enough. Right. I think Olivier said, learn the lines because they've got to be there in your head. Yeah. So why are we messing about not learning them to the last minute? Mm-hmm. Because I found sometimes on television it got me, or on stage, people don't learn lines to the last minute, and then they know it, and you are acting with them, and they've suddenly got it. And the director says, "Oh, you see, they came up." I thought, yes, because they've only just learnt the damned lines.
Well, like I said, but then you already played the role, so then 1973 rolls around. I would imagine you're so much well versed in the project.
Yes, it was 1961 or 62 I played it, so it was 10 years later.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a different adaptation, but some of the lines were and I knew what to do, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. And then how did you get that role in 1973?
Well, it was a producer and director called Joan Craft, but my then wife, Heather, I think she was being a bit silly. She did a very good American accent. She said, "Oh, hi, I'm Michael Jayston's agent over here, and we're thinking we want him to play either Heathcliff or Rochester." And she went on and on about, we really want him for this part. And this went through, and Jane thought, but she wanted me anyway.
Yeah.
And I told her later on, that was very naughty, because it was.
Yeah.
Oh God, can't imagine you as Heathcliff.
But of course, Heather now. I mean, I've been with Anne for 40 odd years. Heather now, I'm still okay with her, but she thinks she got me the part, and she didn't.
You already had the part, right? You said
I did, but it helped.
Yeah.
Because the word went round the whole of the company saying, "Oh, this American rang up of Joan," and Joan.
So would you have played Heathcliff? Had you read Wuthering Heights?
No, this was just off the top of his head. Oh, I played Heathcliff in a. We used to do scenes at drama school, so we did sort of like, I don't know, maybe a quarter of a play. I played a bit of Heathcliff. Okay. I also played Bronte in a Wild Decembers, it was called.
Wow.
Because here we go. My first wife, Lynn Farley, was playing in it, and that got good notices. No, I know that was just for the professors. So I played Branwell, although it didn't include his drunkenness and things. Sure. And Branwell Heathcliff, I'd like to have played Heathcliff.
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
That would be interesting. Not many actors have played Heathcliff and Rochester, except Timothy Dalton has.
Of course he has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be, and he played James Bond, and you played James Bond on radio.
Yeah, I was up for James Bond for reality. Met Broccoli and one of the top directors who directed one of them. And Broccoli said, "Well, if it goes right, you should get it." But there was a guy called Patrick Mower, who I'd known for a long time and was in Emmerdale with me much later on. Mm-hmm. He was up for it as well. Mm-hmm. But then Roger Moore decided to do it again. And then Bond on radio is ridiculous, though, isn't it? I mean, Maggie Smith's son has now done quite a lot on radio. But Bond is not cerebral, is he?
No, it's hard to get the action scenes in audio.
But what was the one I did on radio? What was it called? It was the one with
You Only Live Twice.
Sorry?
No.
That's right. Chinese lady.
The Japanese.
Japanese.
Yeah. You Only Live Twice.
Because Clive Merrison and who's a very fine actor. I mean, he doesn't do much now. And Burt Kwok, who's a Chinese actor who was in... He was in one of the Bond films.
Yeah, I know that name.
Now, Clive was playing Tanaka, and he was doing a better accent than Burt, who was the real thing, although he was Chinese, and I think Burt got a bit upset about that.
So, I was wondering, how did you prepare for the role of Rochester in the miniseries?
Well, don't forget I'd already done it.
Yeah. So, it's just memorizing the lines. Did you have any, chemistry readings with Sorcha?
Chemistry reading.
Yeah.
H2SO4.
Screen test or something.
Did you rehearse with any other actresses? Did they already cast Sorcha to be Jane?
They'd already cast Sorcha Cusack.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think anybody else was up for it.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah.
But it was strange when Sorcha and I went for a costume fitting. I knew her father, Cyril. I'd worked with Cyril, and I'd worked with Sinead Cusack on Quilla, and I did that thing that Albert Finney had done with Audrey Hepburn. I said, We haven't, I was in another cubicle and I said, we haven't really met. And I was putting on a kind of gay voice.
Okay.
Now, all right, Sorcha, you know what I mean? She wasn't anti-gay, but she thought, oh dear, because I know actors acting with gays, if they're doing romantic parts, it's tricky because they know it's difficult. They've got to put on a bit more. Mm. It's like Catherine Zeta-Jones when she was doing her boyfriend in the scene who she was married to. Mm-hmm. She found it quite difficult because he was very, very gay and he had a boyfriend. Oh. And she said it was difficult to... I shouldn't say this. It sounds as if I'm being politically incorrect. I'm nothing against gays whatsoever. But it was difficult for her to play, and she was very good. Mm-hmm. You didn't know. And I didn't know Philip Franks was gay until I met him. Mm. So, you know what I mean? Anyway, a brilliant mind.
Yeah.
Philip, I mean, I think he packed up, he went to writing because he did a show and it upset him so much he got the most awful notices and he had to pack it up. Mm. I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, actually, I was going to...
I'm waffling on again, you see.
No, it's
we love it. So I was going to follow it up, but I think you kind of answered that you hadn't met Sorcha before? You didn't know about her?
Sorcha?
Yeah.
No.
Before Jane Eyre.
And I'd never seen her in anything. I'd worked with Sinead was on Quilla, and I'd worked with her father on a couple of things, and I'd never even seen Sorcha in anything.
Oh, yeah. And I know you did a play with her, like, many years later.
Yeah, Dancing at Lunacy.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that must have been nice.
Because she said it's a we've met together,
yeah.
And she was marvellous in that.
Yeah, I wish I could have seen.
I had to do an Irish accent in that. I remember.
When was that?
Oh, I can't remember now.
Oh,
you know the date.
I have to look that
up. Okay. Well, how long did it take? I know that Jane Eyre was a full unabridged mini series. It was 5-hour-long episodes. How long were you filming, and where did you guys film?
Well, I know we filmed in Yorkshire. We hardly did anything in the studio. We filmed a lot in Yorkshire and places like that, and the real locations of, northern parts. Mm-hmm. And I've forgotten how long it lasted now, but it must have been about probably 6 or 7 weeks.
Oh, okay. No problems, any difficulties filming, or was it just
no? Although I remember before I'd started my stint, they'd done the young Jane.
They filmed it in sequence then, I guess?
Oh, yes. And I watched the young Jane and there were quite a lot of people in there. There was a mother of one of them. She said, who's playing Rochester? She didn't know. And before I could say it, she said, I think Stanley Baker would make a marvellous Rochester. I said, oh, yeah, he would. And she went on a whole long list, and I had to say, she said, well, who is playing it? So, well, I am. Oh, really? I don't think she knew who I was. But I felt quite embarrassed. I was agreeing with her. Well, Stanley Baker wouldn't have made fantastic, wouldn't have made a bad Rochester. But the various names she was coming, Richard Burton.
Oh, wow, Richard Burton, okay.
I mean, bigger names than me.
Oh. I was going to say that Stanley Baker did play Rochester.
I beg your pardon. I was just thinking he probably did.
Yeah. I don't
and you know, Stanley.
It's not available to watch.
Stanley, when he died, tragically, actually, he died of a heart attack somewhere. He was going to be knighted, and he was going to get the posthumous knighthood, but his family turned it down. Now, I'm giving you useless information again. You see. But there were no problems filming really. Apart from one day when we were filming in Edith Sitwell's house in
Renishaw Hall.
That's
I've been
right.
there. I've been to visit.
And that's on the borders, isn't it? That's Derbyshire, and Yorkshire.
Yeah, okay.
That lawn has seen Churchill, Lawrence of Arabia,
really?
Bertrand Russell, you name it. They'd all been there to visit her. Now, they'd done the recce on a Sunday. We come to this whole long scene, but Jane, you know, if you leave me and all that kind of thing. There was ice cream vans and things just over the brow. And they gave me the tape. I don't think is in existence. You should have heard it. I mean, I won't swear on this, but I'm saying, and Jane, expletive deleted. But
start over.
Oh my goodness me. And we had to pack up for about a couple of hours because they tried to pay he said, well, listen, I can sell 40 ice creams. Well, we'll give you the ice cream money. Oh, right, fair enough. But then there was a fire engine came by, and it was a busy, but it looked idyllic. And then there was a ridge where we were filming. Oh, God, that was the only problem I can really think of.
Yeah.
Well, did you have, like I said, are there any other great memories, any special memories from filming those 6 weeks?
Not really. I did slightly fall in love with Sorcha, and I think she did with me. I mean, she was only, how old was she at the time? 24?
23,
I was 37.
Like yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's so sweet.
You were the right age to be Rochester, yeah. And
Yeah.
Stephanie Beacham, I mean, I'm sure she was turning heads on set.
Oh, yeah, she was, I'd met her occasionally, but that was the first time I'd really worked with her.
Okay.
And, I had to sing, My Boat's by the Tower, a Corsair song,
right.
which when I was doing The Sound of Music, I couldn't, Edelweiss is elongated, and I saw, Bonnie Langford agreed with me the other day. Now, Petula, well, no, I'm going off the point again, but Petula said, well, why, I just had a block about it. It's okay on record. Have you heard it on the record?
Yeah.
Because Cyril, and it's not bad.
Yeah.
I wish I'd found out at the time, Christopher Plummer was dubbed.
Yeah, he did sing it.
If only I'd known.
He would have
For the same reason that I had, because I could sing My Boat's by the Tower, My Bark's in the Bay, da-da-da-da-dum, because it's, and I sang as Charles Dickens, in Gray's in Rain, not long ago, an old May lived a life of woe. Well, you know what I mean? But I could sing in tune. I sang in Private Lives as well. And I had this block, and I realised that my ex-singing teacher had said the same thing as I had. He said, actors have a problem, even if they've got a good voice like Donald Sinden had. He was tone deaf. I wasn't tone deaf. But they have a problem. Their breath control for Shakespeare is okay. But sometimes when they get to sing an elongated song, their breath goes.
Well, how did you do that on stage for, how long did you play in Sound of Music?
1 year and about 3 or 4 months. But the first time I sang it, one of my sons, my first son by Anne had just been born, and I was in a sort of state for, I think it was the first rehearsal of the whole play. We'd done about 2.5 weeks. I got a taxi from the birth so I didn't have any sleep, and I felt hyper. And I sang that song. I know I sang it well, and all the fiddles clicked their bow, and I thought, And then, I mean, I didn't sing it badly all the time.
No.
But if I sang a bum note, that was, and especially when Cyril wasn't there, well, don't get me wrong, very few classical musicians drink. The brass players, when they'd had a few drinks, if I got a bum note, that's the note I would sing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You chalk it up to emotion. That's why you're choking on the emotion. That's why your voice.
If I tried to do pitch singing like Rex Harrison that didn't work.
Right.
But
yeah.
there was a fantastic critic in Brighton who I got to know very well. Jack Tinker, his name was, who was one of those gays who was married and had a couple of children, and then decided he'd go off, and his wife was okay about it. But Jack's mother was very northern, and she came to see it one night and told Jack, and came up, and he said, "Oh, it's marvellous you taking my mother out." And she said, "Oh, the notice he gave, he didn't see it for about a week after it had opened. And I didn't sing it too badly that night." He said Michael Jayston's performance coming on under the flag of the brutal Nazi regime and singing this song was one or two others. One said, Michael Jayston has he's got a very fine singing voice, but he's got a very fine speaking voice, but his singing voice can be described as a mellow bellow. And Placido Domingo, all right, Placido Domingo was a friend of Petula and came to see it. Have a guess what Placido Domingo's first part was in a musical.
Wait, something that he wouldn't be able to sing? Was it My Fair Lady or something? Was it My Fair Lady?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I have often walked down this street before. He came to see it, said something to Petula, and said, Petula said, he's saying, what a marvellous voice you've got. And I stupidly said, what, your singing voice? He said, no, speaking voice. Well, he was right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm waffling on again.
Well, I mean, we're wrapping up, I think. We wanted to ask you, I think you already mentioned that you've seen a couple of the Jane Eyre adaptations.
Well, Orson Welles,
Orson Welles and the George C. Scott one.
Yes, but you see, I saw Orson Welles when I was far too young to appreciate it, and it didn't mean much. I thought Orson Welles was damn good in it.
You've never tried watching it again?
I think I saw it maybe, I don't know, 25 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
But I didn't think he was as good as I did when I first saw it.
Oh, yeah.
And yet, it's the same performance.
You're a little older, you have more memories of Jane Eyre, you know the story now, maybe.
Of what?
The Jane Eyre, that it's not, the Orson Welles version is not quite as accurate compared to Jane Eyre, the book.
I don't think so.
No.
I think it's the same as Tinker Tailor. That film, all right, they were marvellous in it, and I knew John le Carré quite well, John Hurt and all that, Gary Oldman, but it only lasts just over 2 hours.
Right. Yeah, the most recent
They
film,
are all fantastic, but if you haven't read the book, our television series was 6 episodes. I'm trying to make the point that Jane Eyre, I think, was accepted by more people now because it was the whole story. You'd got the whole lot. Jane, you could sympathise with this young girl who didn't know what she was doing in a terrible institution and then meeting this. And actually, no, there was one other memory. When I'd done it, I got a letter from head of a monastery, a lady, Mother Abbess, saying, I generally got fantastic notices, but somebody said, yes, but actually in history, why did he lock his wife up? And somebody else said, yes, because in those days you either kept them or they were in an institution. Yeah. And this abbess said, in fact, Rochester behaved as a Christian human being. He didn't get rid of his wife. He had to hide her. Yeah. And some people think that was ruthless, but it wasn't.
Yeah, it was the best.
Because generally in those days, they used to put them in an institution and forget about them.
Right, right.
Or give them some poison and kill them off.
Oh, wow.
So Rochester was more humane.
Yeah. Yes, that's what she said. And I was so pleased. And she also said, oh, by the way, you've got marvellous notices, but if you get a bad notice, assess the critic. And it's stuck in my mind. A lot of critics, like music critics, they're failed musicians. Some, not all critics.
A little bitter.
Yeah.
Well, it's 50 years later, and the notices are in that your performance in that adaptation is the best one. So
No, it's not necessarily.
Yes.
No, a lot of people would like other people.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform. This really helps us grow and reach new listeners. If you want to talk Jane Eyre with me online, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at EyreGuide. That's EYRE.
And if you want to hear more from me, I host my own podcast called Out of Touchstone, where my good friend Chad and I discuss all the films that Disney produced for their Touchstone Pictures label. You can also find me on Twitter at Mike DeKalb.
Thank you, and farewell for the present.